Kia ora koutou. I'd like to welcome you to our Operations and Monitoring meeting for November, and I have asked Mr Paku to begin with a karakia.
O ngā kaunihia o Matawa Māui o koutou app.
Hi.
This is your own app. Yep. This is your own karakia. He honore ka kore ki te atua, e maunga rono ki te whenua, e whakaaro pai ki ngā tāngata kato. Hanga e te atua e ngā kaupau, ki roto ki tēnā o mātou whakatonia, o waioa tapu, e awhina, e tohi a mātou, e ako hoki i ngā mahi, o tēnei rā, āme.
Amen. Kia ora. And I'm just going to call for apologies. We have apologies thus far from Councillor O'Keefe and Councillor Sholem. Would someone like to move? Thank you, Councillor. Yes.
I may have to leave early today as well, and I'm happy to move those apologies.
Thank you. And a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Sears. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, carried. And do we have requests for leave of absence? Councillor Redstone. Thank you. Any other requests for leave? Thank you. Could I have a mover and seconder for those? Thank you, Councillor Barber. Thank you, Councillor Sears. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Just a reminder about conflicts of interest. I expect them to be dealt with in the usual way. And a reminder to any members of the general public who should be watching that our councillors are using their iPads for their council papers and agendas. Now, the last meeting was held on the 30th of September. Would someone who was present like to move the adoption of the minutes, please? Thank you, Councillor Watkins. And a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Kerr. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you. Now, we have item 5, which is the annual report from the Hawke's Bay Airport. And I would like to welcome Wendy Harvey, the Chair, and Stuart Ainsley, CEO of the board, to come forward and make a presentation to us. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. I'd just like to start this morning or this afternoon by saying that this is a completely different situation than what I found myself in last year in terms of reporting the airport's annual results. So it's with a lot less trepidation that I meet with you today, but also with a degree of sadness that I didn't have last year, which is that this will be Stuart Ainsley's final council meeting. And so what we're going to do this afternoon is Stuart's going to go through the good news. I'm going to be the bad fairy turning up with the turbulence ahead. But before I finish, I just wanted to acknowledge that the results that we have arrived at for this year are in no small part due to Stuart's leadership over the past three and a half years. There have been some tough times that we've had to work through, as we've talked through previously, and throughout that time Stuart has always led us without flinching and taken on some incredible challenges, which have included not only COVID but terminal construction, Air New Zealand numbers plummeting, Jetstar removed, you name it, we seem to have faced it under Stuart's tenure, and always he stepped up to the mark and navigated us through it very successfully. So I just wanted to acknowledge Stuart, whose final day will be on the 3rd of December, and the contribution that he has made, but I also wanted to just introduce to you the person that's going to be stepping into Stuart's shoes on a temporary basis for 6 months, which is Stephanie Murphy. So Stephanie is already a senior leader in our airport. She's a strategic planning expert and saves us from ourselves in a number of those situations, but she's kindly offered to step into the role for up to 6 months. Just to give you an overview in terms of progress on that, we have appointed a recruitment agent to assist us in that process, but obviously timing at this part of the year, going into Christmas and so on, means that we will be working through into the first quarter of 2022 to do that. So I'm now going to pass over to Stuart, but just wanted to acknowledge, thank you, and we will miss you, and we will take the appropriate time to acknowledge you in some small way later on. Thank you.
Kia ora. So I was going to start by saying that it has been a privilege being at the helm of Hawkesbury Airport for the last nearly 4 years, and no understatement that there has been an enormous amount of challenges, and I think that those challenges do continue, but I think Wendy will speak to some of the challenges that we're going to see, but I do think there is a bright future ahead, and it's just thinking beyond that. So I just wanted to focus first on some of the highlights for the airport last year. We were really pleased, as Wendy said. Last year we were reporting that we were going to land on probably a loss-making period and take us quite a challenge to recover. We recovered the profitability 17 months ahead of what we forecast, landed on a net profit over $500,000. Something that has, as you're aware, that has been a big challenge for us was getting that terminal opened up to the public. So we were pleased in August to open the doors to the public for the first time. But it's not just all been about the terminal and the financial challenges. It's also worth noting that there's been a number of other key successes for the business during that period. You know, we completed our 20-year master plan with quite a broad community consultation that went out. Over 100 people attending over a number of days out on the airport. We've reached carbon accreditation level 2, the first regional airport in New Zealand to achieve that, and we've set the goal of net zero by 2030. You all noticed in the media recently we were the first business in New Zealand to link up a sustainable linked loan with the ASB as well. So there's been a number of successes come off the back of the period. So I just wanted to talk a little bit around passenger numbers and where we thought we were going to be and where we actually are. At the beginning of the year, our SOI, we were focused around 320,000 odd passengers, and you can see that we've landed on around 461. So when people were able to fly again, we've seen numbers click back up. We've landed 45% ahead SOI, but notable that the most recent set of lockdowns have obviously impacted you know, this first quarter, so we're certainly not out of the woods yet, but a great result given where we said that we were going to be in terms of passenger numbers. Just in terms of total revenue, the story here is, you know, during the period we have actually gone through another pricing reset with Air New Zealand, so that's a significant driver of the revenue uplift. You'll see that revenue is starting to index above the passenger numbers now, so that's positive as we continue to grow. But the other part of the equation is, if you recall, last year we spoke about insourcing our fire service, so that's one of the key initiatives that we used to help us drive operational expenditure efficiencies alongside some really tight control measures during the COVID lockdown periods. Just touching quickly on balance sheet, you know, every metric is heading in the right direction, so that's really encouraging. Obviously, we've managed to refinance during the period, and you know, the balance sheet has been improved by the value or asset improvements that we've made to the terminal expansion. So that's positive. Do you want to jump onto this now? I think the slides are in a slightly different order.
That's okay, fine.
So,
Okay, right, thanks. So look, like I say, I'm the bad fairy turning up to the party, but there are, I guess, some hard facts that we need to consider in terms of what may impact on the airport's performance in the forthcoming year. I think, in short, what I'd say to you is that last year's recovery for us was very much on the back end of a confined period of lockdown and really strong domestic tourism. And we just aren't going to see that situation pan out again this year. Got a very long period of flights suspended out of Auckland. And when you think about that, that's our key route in terms of landings and where we generate our revenue. That's been out since the second month of our financial year. And, you know, at this point, we can't say with any degree of certainty as to when those flights will resume. I think the other things of uncertainty that will impact on us are the vaccination and the certification requirements that are going to be imposed on travellers. I think we have to also acknowledge that our major airline has now, for a very sustained period of time, undergone, quite significant financial challenges themselves. And, you know, I'll say that we've got a formula that we use for calculating our landing charges that we negotiate with Air New Zealand. We were really lucky that in terms of the timing, we got ahead of the bunch, I guess, really, in terms of being able to have those discussions with Air New Zealand. But their situation is a lot more dire since then, and I do know that other regional airports have not enjoyed the same degree of negotiation outcome as we did with Air New Zealand. I think one of the other things that we need to really acknowledge is that our recovery is underpinned by domestic tourism, but in fact, if you go back pre-COVID, we were a feeder for international flights, and at this point in time, it's likely to be another 18 to 24 months before we'll see any degree of normality in terms of international travel. I guess the other thing I would say is that the terminal, as proud as we are of the completed terminal itself, is the gift that keeps on giving, because we still have the building parts that deal with the admin and the office administration to complete, as well as the forecourt. And one of the things that we have really been adversely impacted by the supply chain and availability issues, resourcing issues, and that has really started to reflect through and hit us hard in terms of cost to complete. So I do need to just basically flag that to you. So have you got that slide there? You don't have that slide there. Okay, well, I'll talk to it. So look, in terms of the financial outlook for us this year, we are at this point in time taking the opportunity to look at reforecasting. We have provided with you our first quarter report, and what that shows is that if you took the first month of our new financial year, we were actually smugly sitting there talking about, we may be able to start having discussions around dividends, and then Auckland went into lockdown. So at the time that we set our SOI estimates last year, we were quite conservative because we didn't know what the lie of the land would be, but we in our SOI, we were looking at numbers around the 520,000 passengers based on what we thought might happen. The reality is that since the first month, we've had Auckland in lockdown, and now we are potentially looking at around about 470,000 passengers per year. So still an increase on the year that we've just had, but falling short of the SOI target that we set. However, I do need to say that doesn't translate into a hit on the profit or the revenue stream or the profit line. And the reason for that is because of the renegotiation and the way that we did our negotiations in terms of the calculation with Air New Zealand. So, in fact, it's based on basically recovering our cost to operate and to service Air New Zealand. So, in that regard, the new terminal build does go through into that calculation. So in fact, what we're potentially looking at here is a slight dip on our net profit next year, and it's down to, we're at this stage anticipating around about $200,000 profit year end. So it's not all doom and gloom, but I just want to signal to you that we are pretty much in uncharted waters at the moment. I think the other thing that I just want to flag to you also is that, and we've had this discussion before, it's around the bandwidth that we have to move our CapEx spend around. So at the moment, the upside of planes not landing is that you don't work your assets too hard. So in terms of condition assessment and so on of our assets, we've been able to look at deferring some of this year's CapEx spend, and there are other projects that we are able to push out just simply because now is not the right time to be considering them. So between, I guess, some good negotiation out of the landing fees and some prudent cost management, we believe we still will be able to return a modest profit for next year. Some of the other things I would say to you is that if one thing that this year has taught us is that actually that diversity of revenue stream remains the way to recovery for the airport. So not just focusing on aeronautical revenue, but looking at those opportunities, other opportunities in the commercial property space, and still the solar park that we're looking at. They do still provide opportunities for us in the future, and we will be holding strong on trying to progress those. I think the other thing that we continue to look at with much interest is air freight, and the opportunities that present in terms of using the commercial property and the airside access that provides in terms of generating potential freight opportunities. And, we've had discussions with the port around, what would that mean for the region? What would be a complementary freight service for the region? But early days yet, but something that we continue to focus on. So look, I think I'll leave it there for you, and unless you want to take up anything else.
There's a few
with
other
you.
slides.
Okay, why don't you
I'll
do
just
that,
quickly
Stuart? And we'll...
talk through these. I think the slide pack's in a slightly different order. So I just going to touch on the opening of the terminal, and that was the first week of August. We've got some more improvements coming around retail, and Bay Espressos have been opened for a while now, creating some good coffee offerings. So we're pleased that we've managed to deliver what we said about a strong sense of place. And as Wendy said, the work is continuing on the forecourt out the front. I just wanted to touch a little bit on the arrival origin here as well. Wendy's spoken about the challenges that Air New Zealand are going through, and it's clearly quite a difficult operating environment for an airline to start operating in. So we were delighted during October that we got the first direct services from Hawke's Bay to Nelson started up. And we think that those will continue to thrive, especially in this environment where a lot of people want to fly domestically and at a lower price point. So as much as, supporting our major airline, we want to see diversity and choice across the connectivity. We've also put a bit of work into our vision for growing our property development. And as Wendy touched on around that air freight, the transport and logistics, right at the core of this is our core business around aviation, and we want to convert air to land connectivity. So we want to attract businesses where we can leverage those type of property developments that help to drive that strategy into the future. So there has been some interest in that, but obviously the economic impacts and things like that have slowed down some of the discussions at the moment. Wendy's touched on our solar farm project, and obviously this is something that will be fairly significant for us if we stride ahead in this. We are talking to significant commercial partner, and if we can generate electricity not just for the region but for other large off-takers nationally. It helps us drive a whole new commercial revenue stream, which I think we've touched on before, as revenue diversification for the airport is very, very important when you've got fragility and the amount of people that are flying, especially when you've got pandemic effects that are fairly unpredictable at times. I just wanted to land on the last couple of slides. We've got one of the things that we have done over the last year, and it's covered in the annual report, is our focus on our team and our wellbeing strategy. Our business is built on a strong team and a lot of capability, and we continue to build on that. We've made a couple of new appointments recently which align with our strategy, and we'll be glad when we get to a point where we can open up, I suppose, mask free and welcome in our visitors in a brave new world. So last slide, just to focus around our ongoing strategic direction around our 5 key pillars of operations, commercial, people, partners and property. There's 4 key dimensions that I think are going to be really important to us moving into the future. Safety, security and sustainability are a given. The government are likely at some point in the future to mandate a change in Tier 2 screening at airports, regional airports, so we might see some changes there. But I think one of the big ones for us moving forward, and Wendy has touched on it, is that regional engagement. So making sure that we can continue to work with the rest of the region to drive property, sustainable initiatives, and most importantly have a strong unified voice about how we can connect well with other regions and bring other airline capacity into the region. So on that note, I think that's all I was going to say, Wendy. So I don't know if you wanted to close out.
Just to finish with a couple of points based on what Stuart's just said. The first thing about the solar farm is to really just emphasise that this is land on the other side of the runway that wouldn't be used for any other purpose other than maybe sheep. Okay, so it's about maximising the opportunities that the site that we're operating from present. And I think the other thing I'd say is that right up to the final hour, Stuart's always looking for opportunities to advance the airport. And one of the other things, we've always been really, really certain that in terms of our terminal, it's got to have a local flavour to it. So sitting alongside Bay Expresso, Stuart and his team have concluded a deal with Valentino's. So, it'd be really nice to start to see that. And for those of you who visited the airport, you will have seen that there's a QR code in the form of empty wine bottles. And at some stage very soon, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to announce a partnership with one of the local wineries. So, at the end of the day, it is about a regional asset. So, I think we'll pretty much leave it there. The good news, the bad news, and the fingers crossed news. So I'll throw it open if you've got any questions.
Thank you. Mayor Hazelhurst.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Firstly, can I congratulate you both and the board for a great end of year result, given the incredibly difficult and uncertain times trying to manage an airport, trying to manage transporting people around the country. And I would not expect that as representing our shareholders, we'd expect a dividend in this climate. Not that you haven't said that yet, I don't think. I missed it. But I really would like to acknowledge your vision, actually, and particularly around environmental sustainability, around both economic and improvements to our carbon footprint as a region, and just the stuff that you've done. Can I acknowledge you, Stuart? And for years we talked about having an alternative airline, and we're very sad when one came and went, but the opportunity of you working across and introducing another airline in this climate is very, very well done. And so I'd like to acknowledge the work that you've done, Stuart. I think that, there's no thinking about it. You have been an exceptional manager, CEO of our airport, and you know, you'll be greatly missed. And you and Wendy are a very good team, because it does take a good chair and a good CEO who works and understands the vision and then is able to complete and deliver on that vision. Your vision is loud and proud, and I commend you for that. And Stuart, we wish you all the very best in the next part of your journey. I know you have been a long way from home, from some family, and look forward to you being able to reunite with your family, and just opportunities. But we've been lucky to have you while you've been here, and we've seen, you know, completion of the terminal. It was, you know, an incredible achievement. And thank goodness we started then and not that now. That's all I can say. And even though it was hard during the time, we started earlier and we got through, and it'll be great to see the finished result. So thank you both, and I'm sure my colleagues will have questions on the annual report, but I want to thank you for your hard work through very, very turbulent times.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Support all that Sandra said. I'd just like to go back a few years. Councils collectively had some concerns, and we wrote a letter of expectation to the board. To be honest, I can't remember what we said in it.
I've got that.
I have it, that's lovely. So my question is, and I'm not sure whether I should be asking yourselves, the board, management, whether I should be asking Bruce Allen, is there value in us doing a letter of expectation more regularly, rather than just pulling it out as we want improvement, more around community expectation? Obviously, you're doing very well as a corporate business. Yep. So yeah, my question possibly to both parts.
I'll take that one if you like. So the letter of expectation that we receive from local government and Crown shareholders is underpins our SOI, and that's an annual process which is obviously dictated by legislation. It is incredibly helpful, because the last thing that we want to do is get out of sync with our shareholders. But the other thing is that we measure our performance against the SOI, so obviously there's a huge relevance there. Can I say that in terms of other organisations where I've worked, where there is that similar shareholding, there is quite clear direction through expressions of interest from local government shareholders, which are just broader than the financial returns, and we would welcome receiving that, yes.
Mr. Allen, is that something that we can easily pick up and ensure happens?
Through you, Chair. Yes, it is something that we've been endeavouring to do on a more consistent basis, jointly with Napier City Council as the local government shareholders of the airport, because we've been aware for a long time that the Crown consistently puts forward a letter of expectation. Their aspirations are somewhat different to what the local aspirations are. So it's been a consideration that we've wanted to take on and do more regularly and broaden its scope as well.
Thank you. Madam Chair, can we put that down as an action point to be picked up and ensure? I don't need to change recommendations, but definitely as an action point. Thank you.
Councillor Redstone.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your report. I'm really interested in the solar farm, actually. Yeah, just if we've got any more information we can have on that, about timings or how things are going. I think it's a great
In short, the
initiative.
answer is no.
Okay.
Not at this point. We're actually in commercial negotiations at the moment, and so to the extent that we've been quite, I guess, transparent about what we're proposing to do, then we're now getting down to the pointy end of the discussions with a key partner. And then once we've done that, we hope by the end of the year to be able to come out on a more open basis and share with you that information.
That was my second question. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nixon.
Thank you. I can't be easy in aviation at the moment. I have to accept that. You had number 3 slide, I think, had some passenger numbers on it.
Yeah.
Could you flick those up again? Because I couldn't find it in the report and I couldn't write them down quickly enough. Now, just knowing what's happened in the last 3 months, as you've pointed out, without Auckland particularly, but it was worse than that because actually it was without everybody for, a month or 6 weeks or something. Do you still think that the projections you've got there are going to be achievable, particularly in the current year that we're now in, knowing that you've had to go through quite a substantial lockdown, not of your own doing, but yeah.
Do you want me to? I'll answer that. So,
Okay.
so I think a couple of weeks or so ago, we probably thought game of two halves, but it's probably going to be 3 quarters, average, and then maybe the last quarter bouncing back. In reality, our passenger numbers are probably going to land somewhere between that number and 500,000, but we'd expect the revenue to grow proportional to that because there is a step up in the passenger charge. So I think we're going to land somewhere around the high 400s or low 500s.
But pretty close to what you...
Yeah, so I think Wendy said earlier on, a bottom line of maybe around 200.
There must have been a huge shift in destination, knowing that you've had few, if any, flights to Auckland, and yet the numbers actually have held up amazingly well.
They have, and I think that's just because when people can fly, there's definitely been a propensity for them to fly more frequently. So, our forecasts are that it's going to take us probably into about March to get, lift off again, but it could happen sooner than that. But I think those numbers are a good sort of barometer of what next year could look like, and a good bottom line for the business could be around 500,000, but our SOI is around about 200,000. So my thoughts would be it could be a similar year to this year.
That's good. I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sears.
Thank you, Chair, and my congratulations too, to arrive not having drawn down the loan and a $500,000 profit. I mean, you can't really ask for much more than that with what we've been through. But I'm really interested in the Aero Park that I know has been on the table for a while, and you've talked a little bit more about it. I don't think we have seen it as shareholders, the plans or the initial engagement, and I'm just interested in if you think there's some role for shareholders, or you'll come back to us with a kind of completed deal, or I'm just interested in how you're seeing the process around that.
Yeah, look, strategically, it's about setting a vision for where we want to go in relation to our core business, around transport, logistics, etc. And we are currently working through more detailed development and infrastructure plans to support that. But it's really right now it's a game of what the market's, what's coming towards you and whether it fits that vision or not. And we have had some interest from some fairly large scale businesses, but it's still early doors for that. So there will be opportunity to present down the track what some of our more detailed development plans look like, noting that when we did our master plan community sessions, we actually did have a development blueprint of what that would look like in terms of land use allotment. So we have gone out to the community already with a picture of what that looks like.
However, I'm going to just offer the opportunity for your involvement. And the reason I say that is that it's like getting point-to-point routes added onto the schedules. The regional voice behind you and the credibility that comes from that is, you can't underestimate that. And it's the same when you're looking at attracting business to the region and saying, basically this is what you get. It's not just coming to Hawke's Bay Airport, it's coming to Hawke's Bay. So in that regard, to have, the voice of your I don't say shareholders, I say stakeholders sitting behind you in those discussions, there hopefully should be opportunity for you to add to that process. So we do have a very clear vision for that property precinct. We have consulted in terms of the master plan, but I do believe that the opportunities will, as a stakeholder, you can make or break it for us at times, I would suggest.
Okay, I just want to add one final point that I think is important. A couple of years ago, we said that we didn't want to do the development on a paint by number approach, and there are a lot of businesses out there that would like to see us do small type developments that actually don't fit the airport as a business's long-term interest. So I think what's more important is that we work with the rest of the region about how the airport fits the region rather than what fits in the airport in the short term, because you can make a simple mistake in a couple of years and then 2 years down the line you get a significant opportunity that no longer works. So I just wanted to labour that point, because we have a lot of people knocking on our door saying, can we put a small hangar here? And we're saying that doesn't work for us in the next 10, 15 years. So I think it's something that's important that we work at a regional level on land use alignment.
And sorry, just to follow that off, is that one of the key things about the airport is not just the fact of the land, it's the location of it. We've got transmission, we've got the port, we've got the main road north-south, we've got rail, all culminating in the one area. And so that makes it, I think, quite a strategic, a key location for the region in terms of its transport strategy. So hopefully that will play through in terms of the types of commercial partnerships that we'll be able to enter into on the site.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to hear you say all that, Wendy, and particularly engagement, because you absolutely picked up the point I was making, which is, as both councils, we have such a connected relationship to so many of the businesses and people and all parts of it, that it would be a shame if we weren't in that space to bring that voice to it. So thank you.
Councillor Barber.
Yeah, kia ora. Yeah, congratulations on a good result, and in your report. Just around the terminal, a lot of nice pictures of the terminal. Is it finished? I haven't been out to the airport for like 12 weeks or longer.
From an operational point of view inside, yeah, it is finished. There's a few window dressing things to do, but from an operational point of view and a commercial point of view, it's finished. We have a few things on the outside of the building that need to be addressed, but it's changing by the day. And as Wendy talked about earlier on, some of the impacts on supply chain and even the weather have got in the way in the last few weeks. So I think I'm personally invested in this, I have to say, and by the time I walk out the door, I'd like to see as much finished as possible. So I think there's a lot of hard work going on, but I think if you haven't been out there, you'll be quite impressed by the look of the building from the outside. It's an impressive looking piece of architecture.
Okay. And has it been open, like an official opening, or what? I saw some Māoris up there standing with some kawa leaves. I was thinking, hey, they opened that airport without inviting me.
That was the blessing that you saw. We did actually have tentatively set down a date, which was, as it happened, right through lockdown, right in the middle of lockdown, and then the supply issue started. So on that basis, we strategically withdrew and thought we'd live to fight another day when we know we can get access to the materials to finish it. So I'm not saying no, but I am saying that we've got to be appropriate for the times we're operating in. And, I think that what we're saying is regional acknowledgement, not a great big party, would be the way I'd describe it.
So thank you, Wendy, and thank you, Stuart, and all the best for the future, and thank you for your care of this important resource. We have a recommendation on the bottom of page 8. Thank you. And a seconder, thank you, Councillor Redstone. I'll put that recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you much. It's been a pleasure, everyone.
We now have item 6, and I'll invite Aaron Wilson to come forward and speak to us about our financial quarterly report.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the quarter one financial result. It's been quite an interesting result, because what you're starting to see is some of those figures being impacted by some of the challenges that we're already facing, especially through COVID and so forth. So the accounting result for the first quarter, you can see the surplus there of 781k, primarily driven by the favourable operating expenditure, which is, $2.7 million favourable, and offset by that lower revenue number that you can see there. So we'll just go through those shortly. In terms of the revenue, which is $1.9 million below budget, and it's been quite heavily impacted by the impact of COVID on a lot of the community-facing type activities. Fees and charges are a classic example, which cover quite a range of different activities, and that's around 360k unfavourable. Normally what you would see, especially in quite a strongly driven economy like we currently have in Hawke's Bay, is that would be well above budget. So to be under it shows how heavily impacted that has been. In addition to that, we've had lower subsidies and grants received of around 778k, primarily driven by the Waka Kotahi numbers being lower. We're just waiting for approval for the program, for the 3-year program, so everything was slightly delayed there. And there's obviously an offset in capital spend at that point, because we won't spend the money until we actually get their share. And also the development contributions are around 760k down. That's a lot harder to predict anyway, in terms of budgeting, knowing exactly when those contributions are going to come through. In terms of expenditure, that's $2.7 million favourable to budget. The contracted costs are 1.5 million lower. The expert advice is lower. The legal fees are lower. That's likely to catch up as projects start to kick in over the next couple of quarters. So we're expecting that to even out a little bit. Finance costs around $601,000 lower cost of funds against budget. And also the offset to those is the high depreciation of 543k. That's driven primarily by the significant increase in land and buildings. You'll see that in the Toitoi figures, where the depreciation is quite a lot higher than budget, because of course we have added the Opera House and the big spends that we've had in that area. Whole capital, council capital spend, that's around 10 million under for the first quarter. It's roughly on track with where we were last year in terms of last year's actuals. You'll see the trajectory is quite similar. The COVID level 4 COVID level of around 2 weeks stopped over, I'm understanding, around 15 or so projects from actually starting or being delivered, or slowed them down, delayed them. In addition to that, we had the Waka Kotahi, just the delay on approval, so of course that slowed down the transport spend as well. That's expected to catch up, as is the large water spend projects in terms of that budget. And of course there are some supply chain issues as well, and I think that's always going to be a challenge in this year, like it was last year, as a continuing theme. Just thought we'd end with a bit of a challenges looking forward, because I don't think from the start that it's going to be that easy for the next at least 2 quarters. You've got the Splash Planet, which of course has had a rating impact of around 400k. That's going to happen towards the end of the year. You've got the council, the community-facing facilities like Toitoi, the pools, all of those sorts of libraries, all of those where people may not be so keen to come in, as well as the fact that there has been impacts in the levels. You know, you're getting some changes in behaviour as to where people want to go and whether they want to mix with other people so much as they used to. And then as a counterpoint to that, of course, we've got the pressure of a economy that's really, really going gangbusters, and I think you'll see that in the next presentation. And that, of course, that growth means that there's high demand, which means, of course, that you've got demand on your spend side, you've got demand on your funding side, and the agility to actually meet those demands as well as having constrained revenues on that side. And then you've got the resourcing impacts, which are going to probably stay for I would imagine, the remainder of the year, unless something changes quite drastically there. Any questions?
Two questions, thank you. The first one is the treasury limit. What is our current percentage against that?
Yeah. So we increased that treasury limit.
1.75, yeah.
Yeah.
Or 175, sorry.
What was that, sorry?
To 175?
Yes, yeah.
So what is our current percentage?
What's that, sorry?
What's our current percentage against debt to income?
It is quite low. It's, I can come back to you on that because we do have that number. We have that for our risk and assurance meeting.
Yeah.
So I will come back to you on that one.
And the second question is the landfill surplus of 1.997 million, acknowledging the need for COVID contingency. Mm-hmm. But I think last time we discussed this figure, the suggestion that some of that was put towards a waste minimisation strategy was floated, but I don't see it in here. And having been at an eco-districts meeting earlier this week, where there's some pretty stringent waste minimisation strategies coming from above within the next 10 years, I think it'd be appropriate to reconsider where that 1.997 goes.
So I'll start and I'll hand over to you, Bruce. I mean, the decision that was made when we adopted the annual report was to put the surplus from the landfill into the landfill reserve account, noting both the uncertainties of the impacts of COVID and, obviously the issues that you're raising, Councillor Corbyn, around, waste minimisation, and we've talked about that. So at the moment, that money is sitting in the reserve. I think the challenge for council over the next period of time is going to be, the relative choices between a whole lot of demands that we're going to be facing.
Yeah, I was just questioning landfill development reserves. To me, that means we're going to develop more landfills. So if the choices that we get are outside of development of more landfills, I'm satisfied with that answer. But if it's what options have we got for developing more landfills, I think we need to revisit it.
Yeah, and while I think, again, the appropriate space in the eco-district strategy, clearly, as we know, as a result of growth that we've seen over the last couple of years, we've consumed, for all of the great work we've done around waste minimisation, more of our landfill and collected more revenue. We know that we're going to have to upgrade the landfill at some point, and I think the issue that you're raising, I don't think that's going to change that in the short term, but we're going to have to through the eco-districts. And I think the issue that you're raising, looking at what are the other things that we can do that over time is reducing, waste.
Yeah, what I took from the meeting on, I think it was Monday, was that we are going to have to do some other stuff, and it's going to be coming down on us.
Yeah.
Just through you, Madam Chair, probably just to provide a little bit wider context. What Council does also have available to us, and it's our first call on in terms of those waste minimisation activities to minimise the waste, is we do get waste levy, which is a payment back from the government that the team work through. So that's the first place that we do to charge from. So I think at the next Eco District, if we get Angela to talk through the amount of funding that we get each year and how it's currently allocated, and how many gaps, because that's the first port of call that we use to fund those waste minimisation activities from.
Thank you. Councillor Nixon.
Thanks, Chair. I thought the report we got on Splash Planet was particularly useful in helping us evaluate which direction we should take. You had some facilities up there a couple of minutes ago, about 2 slides back, I think, which Toy was one, oh, they're out here.
Yeah.
And the other is community facilities. And I'm thinking particularly of the ones where we receive revenue, because that's where the risk is. I mean, even Splash, we committed to, was it 450,000 or something, whatever, that's in the budget. I just wonder if it's possible sometime in the near future that we get some sort of report a bit like the Splash Planet one, so we can see what risks there are in our other 2 major revenue activities, so we can better understand it, because you could suddenly come to us wanting another decision of some sort. And I think it would just help if we better understood what our risks are.
Yes.
I'll just cover that off, I think. So what we'll do, and what we plan on doing anyway, for the half-year report, which you'll get in February, March, we'll have a much better understanding of the implications of these restrictions on Toy in particular, and we'll have a bit more of a focus in that financial report on where they are at 6 months into the financial year and how the rest of the year is starting to pan out for them. For this first quarter, it was a little bit hard to gauge and get a full understanding of that, but we'll have a much better picture of that in a few months' time.
I'm just trying to avoid surprises. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dixon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at 4.31, Martin Place Recycling 1 million and Hastings Town Clock 400,000. Is there any likelihood of any progress being made on either of those projects during this particular financial year?
If I go to Martin Place, depending on potential agreements with landowners, the new landowners, in terms of really spending the $1 million, probably unlikely. And the team are just doing some work, but it's around just having, if a part amount of that money may be spent, if we get an agreement with the landowners to get on with some of the design work that we'd need to do to bring Martin Place back online in a modern format, and we'll bring that back to council. Clock Tower, the team are just doing some work again, how to repackage that work, and I can check and confirm timing with that, but they're currently doing updates to cash flow forecasts for the Clock Tower.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I thank you for the paper. I find it really easy to read. There was just one question for me, though, under 4.3, summary of renewals, rest of council. I'd be interested if that could be broken down further. I mean, it's a rather large sum just for rest of council. Is that at all possible in the future?
I think the thing that makes that up is that there's a whole multitude of projects and that build that up. But maybe one thing that we can look at doing is appending something to the report that has a little bit more detail around some of the capital program, rather than the very concise view you get in that table.
Okay, thank you.
And we might better incorporate some of that into the performance and monitoring report as well.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. There being no further questions, we have a recommendation on page 9. Thank you, Councillor Nixon. Thank you, Councillor Kerr. I'll put that recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Aaron. Now, moving into item 7, which is our performance and monitoring report. Again, I'd like to thank the staff for that really comprehensive document, and just a reminder that our goal in setting out this format was that this should be something that you would carry with you until the next time we meet in this committee, and it should, in theory, contain the answers to every possible question that you are liable to think up in relation to council operations, from projects to any manner of things. And again, if there are issues that have arisen that you do not find the answer to in that document, please let us know, because we would be happy to include. So I'll ask Mr. Allen to speak to that, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Really, we'll just take the report as read and take your questions. One thing that we will do this time, as we've done previously with these quarterly updates, is either take a few of the highlights, or in this instance, focus in on one area of interest and do a bit more of a deep dive with that. So Tim and Lee are here and are ready and willing to present this. So maybe we'll take you through one of the strategic priority areas of council in your long-term plan, which is around Hastings economic powerhouse, and take you through a bit more deeper dive of that, and then we'll take any questions if there are any on any other matters that are outlined within the operations report.
And just as a bit of context leading into it, I mean, as we all talk about regularly, you know, an agenda for Hastings over a number of years that has been, you know, positioning Hastings as, you know, off our comparative advantages of food production, big decisions this council made a number of years ago around, you know, our industrial development parks, the work that we've done to revitalise the CBD, position Hastings as a destination. I just thought it was interesting to do a deep dive, because off the back of some annual sort of results from Infometric, I think there's some really big insights that Kim and Lee are going to take you through that really kind of, I think, underscore, you know, how we're talking about Hastings now. So over to you, team.
Thank you. For anyone that doesn't know me, I'm Kim Herrick from Economic Development. Most of you all know Lee. So what I'm going to do is take you through those metrics, then talk a little bit about how that relates back to council and increased activity and potential challenges that we've got going ahead. So it is a great story. Hastings, on every indicator, is doing really, really well. This information comes from Infometrics, and it is the annual average percentage change from the year to up to the year June 2021. So our GDP is up 7% compared to the New Zealand average, which was 4.2%. This is really good growth, and we've seen that mainly across the construction, healthcare and manufacturing industries. But what we can also see on the graph on the right-hand side is that this isn't a one-year wonder. We've had consistent growth going since 2011 and before that as well. So there was a blip, of course, when we had COVID last year with the lockdown, but it's still increasing. Tourism expenditure, of course, is another big positive for the region, and you've probably seen the press releases about that, but our increase compared to the rest of New Zealand is massive, and that's largely due to all the great work that Hawke's Bay Tourism have done and their fantastic campaigns. This has also translated to increased consumer spending in the Hastings district, which is up 13% in the last year, and I will talk about consumer spending in a further slide. Another good part of the story is employment. So employment in Hastings is up 2.1%. Unfortunately, it has decreased across New Zealand, but the main industries there that have seen growth are again construction, food processing and wholesale trade, and they've all gained jobs in the last year. I thought it would be interesting for you to actually take a look at where people are employed in our district. So this is based on 2020 figures, but you can see there that we've got a really good spread across a number of different industries. It's not relating to any one specific industry, which means that we've got a good spread of our risk in terms of employment. As well as that, really positive is that the job seeker support numbers are coming down. you can see that in September 2020, we actually had 3,687 people on receiving job seeker support. This is now decreased down to 3,006, which is really positive. And Hastings, based on September information, has the lowest unemployment in the country. We've got 2.6%.
So I just want to preface this. So this is how unemployment is measured using the Household Labour Force Survey data. I think what's important is it's good trend data around Hastings and what's happening, but we know, given the focus that we have on social development, employment for youth, career pathways, that we also have a population of people that are underemployed. These numbers, the job seeker numbers, doesn't include the whole working age population. It doesn't include the sole parent numbers. So that the main message is to say things are trending in the right direction, but we know that there's still a heck of a lot of work to do with our partners for individuals and whānau and Hastings around employment. But clearly the trend, is a positive one.
Yeah, the trend is positive, but it also brings with it risks as well, because low unemployment, that's terrific, but for our business partners out there, it is a risk that we'll talk about later as well. As we've all probably seen in the media, house prices continue to trend upwards. The growth in the last year was 35% for Hastings. The New Zealand average was 27%. What we know is that in June 2021, the average house value for Hastings district was $798,000. In 2019, the average was only $525,000. So that is a significant increase. The other point to note here is if you look at the graph on the right, Hastings house prices are actually growing at a faster rate than the rest of New Zealand, which does pose a potential risk for us going forward in terms of promoting ourselves when we're attracting business and talent as having cheaper houses. It's something that we have to look out for.
And obviously outside of an economic context, we know homes for our people and having the right number of houses at the right price points in the right places is huge for a range of broader outcomes other than just economic. But I suppose that the other point, and you'll touch on it, is that whilst we know increasing supply of the right types of houses, again, and we've talked about this here many times, as we're seeing very strong increases in construction activity, which is evidenced by the number of residential consent increases.
Yeah. So the other point to note here is about household income growth. We're seeing the increase in house values, but obviously we're not seeing the same increase in our income growth. So, and also I'll touch on this later, all the consents. This was another surprising statistic that we got. So this is car registrations. I've combined private and commercial, but for Hastings, it's up 21.5% in the last year. The New Zealand average, you can see, is only 5.8%. But what this actually tells us is that all that strong economic activity is converting into other areas as well. And the car registration number is a general indication of consumers and businesses' confidence and confidence in the economy through their willingness to make major purchases. So it's another very, very positive sign. So next is a little bit about how this sort of information is impacting us at council, and just food for thought in terms of things to think about as we go forward. So this thriving economy is increasing the number of activity in the industrial sites and the interest in the sites. So here we've got just a comparison between July and November. So we can see that there were 32 tightly held hectares in July, whereas now 41 of those hectares are actually tightly held. This is mainly, the main interest is in Irongate, and this is now driving more interest to Omahu with less hectares available in Irongate. So we can see there that the number of tightly held hectares has also increased. I guess the main message here is that one lot of intelligence tells us that any properties that are held often have, they've got plans already in place if they've recently been purchased, and also that that activity is not slowing. You can see with the number of changes just in the last 3 months that we just need to keep an eye on what's happening. So this, of course, all goes through to the number of consents that are coming through, and that team has had a very, very busy time. The numbers that were provided earlier in the report were based up to June, but I've been informed that has continued for July through to September, that there's ongoing recruitment processes in place to help with this. Interestingly, the number of limbs has increased in the last 2 months. So where you can see we were tracking around that sort of 40 limbs per month, in September and October it jumped up to 70 for September, 61 for October. So that interest is not waning, it's continuing.
Madam Chair, could you please explain what is a limb and why one would be requested, please?
I missed it.
Through you, Madam Chair, a land information memorandum is basically a memorandum that real estate agents and purchasers normally get on a property. It tells them all the issues about issues in relation to the land and the buildings. And it was really interesting. There hasn't been any kind of unusual pattern, and we find it quite unusual that that's happening, because there's an awful lot of properties that are being settled without, even though they get limbs, they have to move so quickly to purchase a property. There's sometimes we're dealing with people who have bought the property and they're still getting the limb. So it's interesting and very busy.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the other great message is that this economy is flowing through into the retail spend in our district. So what you can see in the first graph is the percentage increase in spending in the various districts. So we've got Hastings, CBD, Havelock North, Flaxmere and the rest of Hastings. And since 2018, this Hastings CBD has seen a 15% increase, more in Havelock North, even more in Flaxmere, and the rest of Hastings was up at 26%. So that's great growth. On the right-hand side, the spending comparison, we find it useful to benchmark against other districts just to see how we're tracking. The grey bars indicate that actually Hastings is tracking alongside counterparts of, say, New Plymouth and Palmerston North, where they have similar populations. The orange line actually indicates the increase in the last year compared to some of those other districts. So what this tells us is that the increase in spend in Hastings is more than those other districts by quite a lot. And just to give you an example, actually back in 2018 in Hastings, the CBD spend was 214 million. Track it forward to this year and we're up to 229 million. So, and that's not including the COVID year, obviously. But it's, again, a good positive story. We wanted to see whether this was any particular store type that was affected. Obviously, as we all know, we're all spending more money on groceries, and the liquor retailers are actually doing quite nicely too. So that's where we see the increase, but the others, it's been consistent for all other store types within the district as well. So it is a great news story for Hastings District, but as I think you've had other people talk about today, there are challenges going forward that we have to be really mindful of. The biggest one is supply chain. This is causing issues across all industries, from exporters, importers, farmers, construction. Some examples, actually the information says that it's going to last for 12 to 18 months. And an example would be an importer that I spoke to the other day said it normally takes them 2 months to receive product that they've ordered. That's now 5 months. Building materials, as we know with other projects and other reports, aren't arriving on time, projects are delayed. We've got shipping lines that aren't actually calling here. This is affecting our building, but it's also affecting our exporters who are sometimes having to consolidate shipments. Easier for the big boys who can hire their own ship, not so easy for some of our small businesses. Another example, fertiliser costs have gone up 20 to 30%. And the average cost for sending a 40-foot container has increased from, I've heard, 2,500 this time last year to 10,000 this year. Another factor that we need to consider is China. China have very strong regulations around COVID entering, if COVID is found on any part of their supply chain. So that's quite a risk factor for any of our exporters where China's a major market for them. We also, of course, have the labour shortages. This is affecting across the board horticulture, agriculture, the meat industry, construction and hospo. And the health sector as well. So, and that's keeps going. Of course, vaccination rates and the risk of further lockdowns is an ever-present change to the world that we have to deal with at the moment. Overall, we're in a great place to actually meet these challenges. We're in a strong position, but we need to be very mindful of all of these things going on. Thank you, and any questions?
Thank you. Councillor Kerr.
Sorry, Madam Chair, my comment was going to be on the whole report rather than the economic bit, if I may.
Absolutely.
I loved reading this quarterly report. I really like that it ties back. I'm not sure who I should be talking to here. I'll talk to Madam Chair. Really like that it ties back to the LTP that we started the conversation with as a group of councillors at the rugby club rooms. And we had our aspirations, and now we have a document that's reporting back on the actions. I found it a particularly easy read. I like the language, so congratulations to those that have put it together.
Thank you. Mayor Hazelhurst.
Thank you. Thank you for a fantastic report, team, and so easy to follow and understand. A couple of questions from me. First and foremost, on the economic development overview on page 85, paragraph commencing consumer spending boosted by tourism spending, which hit 183 million in June 21 this year. Is that a Hastings figure or a Hawke's Bay figure?
That's through you, Chair. That's a Hastings figure.
Thank you. And my other question is around your slide on industrial sites, and I'd like to go back to that slide around Pinegate. So if we look at the area where it says vacant, 2021, November 21, 62, can you just explain the tightly held versus vacant, what that means?
Yes, through you, Chair. My understanding is that the tightly held properties are properties that have plans in place, are already developed or have been subdivided. They are tightly held in terms of there are plans to move them forward.
So that comes off the 62 of vacant?
That's right, they're actually a subset of the vacant land. So there's,
So-
within
so-
the vacant land, there's some land that's tightly held, and there's some land that's freely available for
So if you
development.
take off the 62 from 41, that's what we've got left available
Yes.
in Iron Gate.
Yes, so 20,
Okay.
there's actually only 20 hectares available in Irongate, and so that number of tightly, it's decreasing. What the space available is decreasing.
So we've got 20 hectares left in Iron Gate for industrial growth.
Yeah,
Okay.
based on the market intelligence that we have and all the people that we're working with. So it's the judgments of that market intelligence around what we're knowing, what's going on in terms of who's acquiring land, you know,
So
and
in terms
plans
of,
that are in
so
place.
thank you, and so in terms of us and how we manage and how we provide for industrial growth, that sets a very, very direct and clear picture that you've shown us today. With 20 hectares, that, give or take, more or less, that we know we have available. Because all mahu there isn't going to be any more, because it's, you know, it's plains own land. So, you know, we've got to look at how we manage industrial growth, and it's, I don't think it's a working brief. I think it's a serious piece of work, actually. And I think that we need to have an action point from this that looks at how we are going to, we're seeing the massive development in horticulture. You know, we know that there's going to be great need for more cool pack houses and cool stores, and where are they going to go? So I think it's, I know spatial plan and all that sort of stuff, but I think it's over and above that.
Yeah, through you, Chair, just to, from an officer's perspective, you've already tasked us with a very specific action. We are about to come back, obviously, with an industrial capacity assessment shortly in the new year, and you've also directed us to look at industrial land, including alternative, you know, areas for industrial development outside of what's been designated in HPUDs. So we're expecting to bring that work back to council as we were directed to early in 2022.
Oh, thank you. Happy with that approach.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you. Earlier this week, we missed the opportunity to have the economic development regional presentation for the second or third time. And I'm just interested to know where we are at with that and how we will progress going forward.
So, through you, Madam Chair, the council, along with other councils in the region, will be considering the report on economic development from the review that was commissioned on the when you meet on the 9th of December. The recommendations for councillors across the councils in the region to consider is recommending the establishment of a independent entity for economic development for Hawke's Bay. It is recommending a form of that entity, either a trust or incorporated society, whatever works best for tax purposes. That its mandate isn't things that we're currently doing, a mandate that is about the strategic coordination of an economic development strategy for the industries and sectors that make sense for Hawke's Bay over the long run, and a level of funding that will ensure that it has the base capacity, including paid governance, to go forward. So that's what's coming to councils in December. What I can also report back is that we've had a strong letter of support from TKO that is basically saying whilst they want to be involved in the development of the performance frameworks, they're supportive of the approach on the basis of co-governance and management, and we've also had strong indications of support from the business community. But that is a paper that will be coming to all the councils in December.
Thank you. We have a recommendation on page 18. Could I have a mover and seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Thank you, Councillor Lawson. I'm going to put that recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Thank you. Item 8. Mrs. Stetner, do you have anything to add, or is it self-explanatory? Yeah? No. Okay. In which case, if no one has any questions relating to any of those legoimas, we have a recommendation on the bottom of page 19. Do I have a mover and seconder? Thank you, Councillor Sears. And a seconder, thank you, Councillor Dixon. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. And item 9 is just really receipt of a report from the Hastings District Heritage Trails Society. Megan Williams, who's the chair of that, was very keen to have council receive her report since they access funding from the council, and she felt that they ought to be accountable. And in relation to that, tomorrow they're actually opening their latest trail, which is Clive. However, because it's being hosted at a school, they have very, very limited numbers as to who can attend. So, no, there's going to be a virtual launch of that. So could I have a mover and seconder for that report, please? Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Thank you, Councillor Lawson. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you, carried. And then we also have an additional item, which is item 10, which is a request for an extraordinary civic and administration subcommittee meeting. That's reasonably self-explanatory. It relates to tenders, and mover and seconder for those 3 recommendations that are on page 3. Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Thank you, Councillor Dixon. I'm going to put those recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you, and I'm going to declare the meeting closed, and then we have a briefing following that. Yeah.